Trump does seem fixated on Carg, and I'm hearing from people who have connections in that Carg is what they're looking at, like seriously. The president wants to do it, the military is trying to provide him options to do it, and they want to do it over a weekend. They're very, very heavy into the planning for this thing. So you've got about 5,000 Marines on standby right outside the Strait of Hormuz. I actually think the Iranians will probably let them take Carg. And then as soon as they land, the Persians will close the trap around them. To do what we want to do, we need tens of thousands of troops that we don't have.
Is it possible that they could secretly be moving troops in that we're not hearing about?
It's very possible. I think it's going to start with a massive final blitz this weekend. You're going to see some kind of ground operation soon. I think Trump's going to blow up the civilian infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure. The Iranians have already said, if you hit our electrical grid, that's it. I think the Iranians do have a rudimentary nuclear capability. And if they really think it's the end for them, they will use it. It's going to get ugly over the next 6 months, I think.
World War III is already happening.
This is a house of cards, and it is in the process of collapsing right now.
You're going to see an economic crash, the likes of which we've never seen.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here today on the channel, back once again. I'm joined by Brandon Weichert, a national security analyst, author, and leading commentator on geopolitics and military affairs. He currently has a Substack called the Weichert Brief. So go and check that out. I will post a link in the description below. Brandon, I was recently listening to a debate that you had with Jonathan Conricus over at Mario Nawfal. If people don't know, he was the former spokesperson for the IDF, and he's of the persuasion that the U.S. should commit to a full-scale ground operation. Yeah, you did very well in that interview, and I just wanted to commend you on that because...
Well, thank you. I did think there were one or two spots I could have done better, and I knew at the time. I think you can see my face where I'm leaning into to say something, but also, you know, it wasn't my show, so Mario was kind of, you know, he had his own pacing he was doing, and I had to respect that. I did, though, get him to admit, I think it's at the 21-minute mark, if your audience is curious, because it's very fascinating. He had no compunction about self-admitting, without any pressure from me, that he wanted us to attack civilian targets in Iran.
Yeah.
That not just like, oh, we're gonna hit a military target and it just happens to hit a civilian. He's like, no, we need to attack. So we need to make the Iranians feel pain. And
I was totally surprised that the IDF spokesperson had no qualms with bombing civilians.
Well, I think it's a window into the to the disposition of the military. And and I thought, you know, and I did kind of highlight it, but I thought maybe I should be more attacking, but I thought, you know, his words and his sort of like aloofness about why this would be a problem, I thought that spoke more. I think audiences are able to infer just by looking at that. That's who we're dealing with right now is, look, the Israelis have their own set of objectives and the Israelis have their own national security interests. I don't begrudge them that. I don't, but ultimately it is not U.S. military policy, in fact, to willingly go out of the way to target civilian targets. That I know that it happens, and I know that we've killed a lot of innocent people. I know that, but in my view and in my read and in the people that I know who are very senior in the military, they are not trained to willingly go out and just start killing civilians, which is what Conricus was really saying he wanted us to do.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also that Geneva Convention thing, which I know doesn't really matter too much anymore. But what this demonstrates, though, is that there is not only an appetite for it, but they actually think that it's feasible, that they can do it. And to play the devil's advocate, there is that old understanding that the U.S. does tend to win every battle but lose every war. So, well, I guess with the exception of World War II. But
that was the last actual declared war we fought. I mean, remember, we haven't actually technically fought a war since 1945. Every conflict we fought, even though we call them wars, has not legally been defined as a war. And certain capabilities and certain things that are done under the constitutional mandate of a declared war were not done during the other wars that we fought after World War II because Congress never actually declared war. And so it's very important, your audience, in our system here, there is actually certain things a president can and cannot do And actually, some people have said that I spoke to who were Vietnam veterans, if the president Johnson had just gotten an actual declaration of war, we might have actually been able to actually win that thing, because we would have gone full bore. We wouldn't have done this sort of boxed in strategy. Something similar you're hearing, by the way, from a lot of Russians about Putin's special military operation. It's like, why hasn't he? Because in their system, there's also a distinction. I don't mean to take over here, but that is something to consider.
Knowing that they could potentially take Parg Island or Kishim Island, then it leads me to believe that there's a high likelihood that they might attempt this. Now, yourself, Robert Pape, some others have been insisting from the beginning that this was likely on the menu, and now it's become quite in vogue to talk about ground invasion, so much so that the president himself doesn't deny that this is a possibility. It seems like things are getting ready to flare up this weekend. We have the U.S. sending dozens of refueling tankers to Ben Gurion, as well as attacking a lot of the coastal cities and the bridges, as you know. What's your take on what they're planning for not only this weekend, but I guess for the next couple weeks?
So what I was told about 2 weeks ago on a closed call with somebody who's connected, it was a panel discussion for very high level executives and national security people, and I was at the last minute asked to fill in for somebody who couldn't make it. You had people from the executive team at ASML. You had people from very interesting rare earth mineral companies. You had a lot of different organizations represented on the panel. And it was international, but it was all about basically what the U.S. is going to do to sort of bolster its economy and sort of prevent the negative effects from the war from hitting the economy, or trying to mitigate it. And one of the people on the panel, who was former Army intelligence and is now running a very large $1 billion plus company, he was very nonchalant in saying he had just gotten off a call with the Pentagon because there was supposedly a briefing 2 weekends ago, or 2 weeks ago, 2 Fridays ago, actually, that they were trying to figure out how can the U.S. sustain the rare earth mineral supply chain after we go into Carg, after we basically go in full bore with ground troops. And this guy's expertise was rare earths. And he said that guys like Jack Keane, former general, are heavily involved with the conversations on this. And basically the president wants to do it. The military is trying to provide him options to do it, which is insane because there's not many options. And they want to do it over a weekend. And they're going to want to do it when the media cycle is not paying attention. And they're going to want to do it basically over a weekend. And it could come, he said, it could come as early as 5 to 7 days, or he said between now and September. But he said that they're very, very heavy into the planning for this thing, that he thinks it's going to happen because of the way that they were talking about concerns over maintaining supply chains and whatnot from a protracted shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, for instance, and what China might do in retaliation with the rare earths. So yeah, this is a real thing. And I will just say 2,500 Marines per Marine Expeditionary Unit. So there's 2 MEUs that are deployed right now. I don't think they're sending another. So you've got about 5,000 Marines on standby right outside the Strait of Hormuz. Not all of those 5,000 people will land on Carg Island. That's another thing to remember. And then you've got another, I think, 8,000, maybe 82nd Airborne in, I think, Kuwait, or would be deploying from Kuwait, which is why, by the way, Iran is striking Kuwait so heavily, because they know that's the likely attack route of a 82nd Airborne assault. So maybe 8,000 plus 5,000, just generalizing, that's still not enough troops to take and hold. They can probably take Carg. I actually think the Iranians will probably let them take Carg, because I think the Iranians, they're going to do to them what the Persians did to Crassus when the Romans invaded. They're going to come on in deeper, go on in. And then as soon as they land, the Persians will close the trap around them. And that trap in this case will be endless amounts of drone swarms, missile swarms. The island is heavily booby trapped. I mean, it's 8 kilometers of sheer death. And really, this is not going to end well, especially because to do what we want to do, we need tens of thousands of numbers of troops that we don't have. We just don't have those troops.
This is usually the part of the video where we inject the annoying commercial, but this one is actually important. To commemorate Independence Day in the USA, the world's premier freeze-dried food producer is offering a limited time offer of 20% off all of their delicious 30-year shelf life food. You can use the coupon code Canadian Prepper for this exclusive offer. This company has years of experience stockpiling the U.S. military's pantries, bunkers, and submarines. Don't miss out on this amazing offer. And now, back to the video. What benefit would there be in taking Karg Island that couldn't be gained by simply keeping it under fire and preventing them from loading vessels? Like, I don't understand what the purpose of putting troops on there just to act as some kind of tripwire. Like, what's
no, it's not being a tripwire. It's sea control. So basically, Trump has made it clear that the center of gravity now is not the nuclear weapons program. It's not their ballistic missile program. It's reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which I would remind your audience was open and functioning with no problems before the war began.
Yep.
He now has to reopen that because we are running out of oil in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. China's running out of their Strategic Petroleum Reserve. At some point, China will have to come back onto the market, which is going to, less supply, more demand is going to inflate the price of oil significantly for people at the pump. If that
was the case, though, why wouldn't he just let the oil flow with the MOU? Why not just
I'm with you. I'm with you, and I have no good explanation other than to tell you my thought is maybe he doesn't like being looked upon as having gotten one over on him. And let's face it, if the Iranians can officially declare there's a new boss, a new sheriff in town with the Strait of Hormuz, then everybody will know Trump lost the war on some level. And Trump doesn't want to live with that. So he'd rather keep stringing this thing along, looking for leverage so that he can at least go and say, hey, I have reopened the Strait of Hormuz as it was before the war. I won. But the Iranians are not going to let him have that for multiple reasons, most of which is because they want to earn money off of it. I mean, they've done the numbers. Whether we agree with their numbers or not, the fact is they think they can make significant amounts of money every year by tolling the Strait of Hormuz. And they're not going to let Trump get that back, as well as the fact that the Iranian regime, the legitimacy, the source of their legitimacy has never been economic prosperity. That's actually been one of the great weaknesses of the regime. The source of their legitimacy has always been being the religious leaders plus the symbol of resistance to the American empire. And so by ceding the Strait of Hormuz back to the way it was before, the Iranian regime will actually lose face at home. And so they're not going to ever let that go, not unless we take it from them. We can't take it from them the way we've been doing things, because we don't have enough forces in the region to destroy all of Iran's defenses, that a lot of them are hidden underground. We don't know where they are. We have an idea. We can't reach them. And then also we have the added problem of we don't want to risk our ships because, let's face it, you look at the depletion rating of SM-3s and SM-6s by the Navy. Yeah, that tells me something. That tells me that for the last 2 months, there's been some significant sea-based warfare that we are not being told about in the press, because those SM-6s and SM-3s for the Navy have been depleted rapidly in 2 months. And then I'll just conclude answering your question. Trump needs to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, so just denying the Iranians access is insufficient. He needs to also be able to land and be able to conduct sea control to force open the Strait of Hormuz. But the conclusion
here... But what could those troops on that island actually do?
Well, that's the Marine mission of sea control, where they basically would be interdicting and preventing and defending against potential Iranian attacks from their coastline going at ships passing through. But the point is that it's not going to work, because first of all, Karg is too close to the Iranian coastline. Second of all, there's not going to be enough troops to be able to actually do everything they want to do. And once we land our people there, good luck resupplying them. Good luck getting all that
through the strait also.
That's
to
right.
Get there.
It's an insane prospect, but I really think the president is glommed onto this because he doesn't understand the military reality. He's not a military guy by nature. He's bombastic, but he doesn't understand it.
So going back to something that you were saying earlier, and there was a bit of a disruption here at the time, so I maybe I didn't hear correctly, but you had said that you had a contact with a source who was treating it like a foregone conclusion that Carg Island was on the menu and that it was simply a matter of when, not if.
That's right. That's exactly what I was told. And I hope to hell that this person is wrong, because I can't impress to your audience enough. The force structure that we have arrayed in the region is not sufficient to accomplish this mission. That no matter when he decides to do it, there's not going to be many more troops put in. We don't have many more troops to put in.
What about all these troops that we hear about? Like, you hear there's 50,000 troops.
There's 50,000. Yeah, but they're not all combat troops. I mean, that's also a misnomer. Like, they're not all combat. These are a lot of support people. These are a lot of, technicians for the gear and the weapons and all that. They're not all 50,000 of them are not, my understanding, are not combat troops. Right, that's like a fraction of those 50,000 people. Now it is more troops. 50,000 troops is more troops than we've had during relative peacetime. So that's for sure that we have more troops in position than we have, say, a year or two ago during relative peace. But that's still fewer troops than what we hit Iraq with. And Iraq was nowhere near of a hard target the way that Iran is. I mean, we're talking about, we had, 150,000 troops we went into Iraq with, plus 50,000 British troops. Yeah. And I think some monkeys from Romania for minesweeping. That was a massive, and even then, if you remember, Don Rumsfeld, the legends were, the legendary fights between Rumsfeld and General Franks in the run-up to the Iraq War. They call it the iterative process. Rumsfeld said, I only want 50,000 guys to go in. And Franks was saying, are you kidding me? Our plans call for 500,000 troop build up over almost a year. And Rummy said, no, we're going to do it in half the time with 50,000. And they ultimately settled on 150,000. And the U.S. military planners were going crazy at CENTCOM, saying that's still not enough troops. Yeah. And now we're talking about hitting a harder target in Iran that has a pretty sophisticated military, as we've seen, with maybe 10,000, 12,000 Marines and airborne guys. This is not going to work. It's just not. Now, I will add there are two other moving parts to this story, or three other moving parts that other people are not. I talk about it on my Substack. The first moving part is we continue to arm up the Iraqi Kurds. And the idea is that the Iraqi Kurds will open up another front directly on the ground against northern Iran. Then there's the added thing of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq. I have been told that we continue arming up the MEK, and that the idea is once the Kurds from Iraq go in, the Mujahideen-e-Khalq will supposedly they have tens of thousands of fighters in the middle of the country. I don't believe that numbers are correct.
And where are they fighting out of?
They're all in the middle of the country, basically. They'll spring up from within
like
and along. Yeah, in Iran and along the border. This is what I've been told. I don't think any of this is accurate, though, in terms of what the intelligence community thinks. But basically, the MEK is supposed to break out within Iran, in the southern and the central part, and then the Kurds go in through the northern part, and that pressure will basically collapse the regime, and then we'll go in and take Karg, which will deprive them of their oil infrastructure, as well as allow us to reopen, in theory, the Strait of Hormuz. All the meanwhile, Jalani now calls himself Shah of Syria, launches about 40,000 ISIS or former ISIS and al-Nusra front troops to go fight Hezbollah in Lebanon, relieving the IDF in southern Lebanon. This is what the big play is.
Well, that would be consistent with what Trump hinted at. Not that we can take anything he says really seriously, but that it wouldn't be us
but I do
doing
think
the fighting.
I do think that he's serious about this, and that's the scary thing. Is that he's serious, because nobody's sitting him down saying, okay, what happens when the Kurds can't acquire ground? What happens when the MEK doesn't show up to fight, right? What happens when we lose a Marine Expeditionary Unit or those planes carrying the airborne or shot down. Nobody's talking about second and third order effects around Trump because Trump doesn't want to hear it because it's negative.
It could very well be that he is being lured into a trap. The Iranians today said the following. I think it was the IRGC, some IRGC spokesperson said the movements and equipment of the terrorist American military are under the surveillance of Iran's naval units, with every passing moment to the 0 hour for operation against CENTCOM's naval units in the region's waters. Yeah. Just wait. And so it's almost as if it does seem like many of us would have thought by now they would have at least hit a ship, like with one of these anti-ship missiles that they could have saturated. They could have done something.
I think they did.
Maybe they have, but nothing has been officially acknowledged.
Right, and it won't be
by CENTCOM.
The Israelification of the U.S. military is underway. We lie about everything now.
Right. But I mean, you would think that at this point it would be something that would be irrefutable because you would have video evidence or something to the effect. But we haven't seen it yet. But it does seem like they're withholding a little bit. I mean, we're talking about, you're using the Iraqi example, 150,000 troops. They didn't have this mosaic kind of decentralized structure. They've learned all the lessons from Saddam Hussein's collapse. They've learned a lot in the last 20 years. They potentially have nuclear weapons. I mean, we're talking about ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles. They're also aligned with the Russians and the Chinese who hate our guts now. So this is an entirely different animal. At the same time, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I guess I somewhat agree with the IDF guy that, yes, indeed, the U.S. tends to win every battle. And so it would not surprise me if they were able to pull off some sort of amphibious victory and, stave off the onslaught of loitering munitions for a certain period of time, maybe incur some minor casualties and plant the flag on the ground. And, and then who knows what comes after that. Then we're in the mission creep cycle. And so I think just by virtue of him believing that it's so plausible means that there's people in Washington that also think the same way, wouldn't you think?
He said as much. I mean, he said he's talking to CENTCOM people, and CENTCOM disagrees with me. And of course, my point was CENTCOM has gotten a lot wrong. And, CENTCOM, there's a lot of problems with CENTCOM. Like a lot. Yeah. There's cultural problems in CENTCOM, the culture there. There's problems with it's a little too pro-Israel. It tends to take on the Israeli viewpoint far too much. I mean, it's almost operating like it's separate from the Pentagon on some level. So there's a lot of problems with CENTCOM, in my opinion, and it's really not been CENTCOM to me. The heyday for CENTCOM was under Norman Schwarzkopf, maybe under Anthony Zinni as well in the 90s. Desert Storm, right? And then I think Anthony Zinni was okay. He was a Marine, though. I mean, the Marines are a cut above. I don't think that Conricus citing CENTCOM analysts is really indicative of anything other than a political, machination there. And we know, by the way, during the fight with ISIS, right? I mean, this was a big controversy, is that a lot of CENTCOM professionals resigned in protest because they were being told by their commanders to change the conclusions of their intelligence analysts before sending them up the pipeline to the CIA and to U.S. Army Intelligence HQ and to the NSC, because Obama didn't want to hear about ISIS. They were the JV team. So that was a big scandal in 2013 or 2014. And that's actually one of the reasons Mike Flynn turned on Obama, because remember, General Flynn, everybody knew this at the time. General Flynn was considered Obama's general. He was at one time Obama's favorite general. And part of the reason he turned on Obama was the CENTCOM story. So CENTCOM has a lot of problems, and I with all due respect to them, because I know some people there who are stand up, but as an institution, it leaves much to be desired, in my opinion.
So we've been talking about Karg Island, but the obvious elephant in the room is that in order to get there, they got to go through the Strait of Hormuz in the first place, which leads a lot of people to suspect that there might be something planned for Qasem Island. And that would be the logical place where if you wanted to control the Strait of Hormuz, that's where you would put troops.
That's certainly, it might even be an island hopping strategy at the end of the day, like World War II. We take one, then we go to the next. Here's the problem with Kashem. Kashem has, I believe it's the largest underground IRGC facility in all of Iran.
Right.
It's not a nuclear
like an unsinkable underground aircraft carrier.
Aircraft carrier, yes. And it has layers and layers of drones and missiles that we cannot hit from the air. So I do know Kashem is something that they've talked about as well at the beginning of the war. Trump does seem fixated on Karg. That could be a misdirection. But like I said, I'm hearing from people who have connections saying that, no, Karg is what they're looking at, like seriously. But then again, like I said, to do sea control properly, you've got to not only degrade what you can find along the coastline of Iran, which they're doing, what they can find. That's the key. It's like Vietnam. They're only blowing up what they can see. There's a lot they don't. So they've got to do that, but then they also have to be able to control those key access points. And Karg is the center of that, but Kashem is sort of the outer periphery. It's like the first wall in the line of walls you've got to take. So it's very possible that there is some plan. Possibly the Marines land on Kashem and then the airborne tries to take Karg. And then you sort of have that 1-2 punch. Again, not enough troops. And I don't see us yet flowing in requisite numbers of, this is what I wanted to say to Conricus yesterday, but Mario interrupted with breaking news. And I wasn't able to get back to it. But Conricus kept saying, well, it would be great if you did have more troops, but even with what you have, it's like, no, well, hold on. There's a reason, Clausewitz spent a lot of time talking about mass in his book on war and the fundamentals. I know technology's changed a lot since Clausewitz's time, but the fundamentals of war making remain, well, they're fundamental. And, Clausewitz talked a lot about massing forces and the importance of that. We're not massing the requisite number of forces. Part of the reason we're not is because our bases in the region have been destroyed. We can't use them. This is why the Israeli Airport Authority is screaming bloody murder at the U.S. Air Force, because they've had to reschedule more than 50,000 flights in and out of the country. This is key tourism season for Israel. Their economy needs a civilian tourism coming in, especially now, but they can't land planes at their main international airport because our tankers are taking up all the room. And we had originally started pulling them back 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now all those
first world problem.
Yeah, exactly. but it's indicative of something is being planned long term, because Trump has said not only is he not going to pull those things out of Ben Gurion, he's sending more in, and they're going to be there indefinitely. But that also tells you, why aren't we? How embarrassing! We have all these bases supposedly closer to Iran,
and
we
of course
can't use them.
The Israeli war hawks, like they probably want those planes there. I mean, they want
absolutely.
more U.S. So
well, generally, the general disposition of Israel's government toward that issue is, it's an inconvenience. But, the Israeli Airport Authority and the Israeli business community is definitely not happy. They're not happy with this, especially because the Israeli economy is already doing so badly because of the war. And even before the war began, remember, key ports in Israel, the Red Sea ports, were already closed down because of the threat from the Houthis. So Israel's a country that depends on international imports and exports. So the Red Sea is one of their primary ports, and the 2 ports there were basically not in use for a long time because of the Houthi threat.
Now, is it possible, this might be a naive question, and I can already hear all of the military analysts just, screaming and punching the screen. Is it possible that they could secretly be moving troops in that we're not hearing about?
It's very possible. Yeah. No, it's possible. I mean, I can only go off of open source. So it is very possible that there's movements that we don't know about. Although, I think that what I think will probably happen is we're going to go with what forces we have in the region. We're going to escalate with them. What'll happen is we'll hit a roadblock, and I think we're going to lose a lot of Marines and a lot of airborne. And at that point, Trump will then go to the people of the American Republic, so-called, and will say, in honor of their memory, we must escalate, and we need more. I need more power to do this. I need more time or more money.
And that's what I meant as a tripwire force.
Oh, yeah. Well, then, yeah, in that way, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's what's really at play. I think the goal, and I don't think this is actually Trump's plan. I think this is coming from his Israeli paymasters. I think the goal is to, like the frog in the boiling water, ease the American people into this new paradigm. Sort of like how they ease the American people into the new normal of COVID, right? You're gonna ease them into this idea that we have always been at war with Iran, and we must therefore defeat them. And right now, there's no real impetus from the American people to do this. Yeah. But, you know, if a lot of our boys get killed, there's going to be naturally anger. And this is something that PEPE talks a lot about in his escalation work, which is there's going to be like a 25 to 37% group of Americans who, after that first significant loss of life by the U.S. military, they're going to say, well, we're invested now. We got to go. We got to go for it no matter what. And that was sort of what defined Vietnam. There was always a cluster or percentage of Americans who were like, no matter the cost, we've already committed blood and treasure. We got to go now. It's a sunk cost fallacy. Yes. But, you know, I think that's why you're not seeing the troop movements the way that you would normally see them. I think it's because, and also I also think there's a lot of just miscalculation on the part of the president. I think the president has made a series of assumptions based on nothing more than the promises of Netanyahu and ideology rather than real intelligence. I don't think remember, he believed 96 hours this war was going to last and it would end with the people rising up like they did against the Soviets in the 90s, you know, and peacefully overthrowing the government. The government would collapse from the inside and he would be the man who took down the 47-year threat relatively bloodlessly and cheaply. It was completely wrong. I mean, he completely misunderstood. You know, he turned to his advisor and he said, I didn't know that they loved Khomeini that much because there was 15 million people at Khomeini's funeral.
Yeah.
You know, this is a lot of bad assumptions.
So there's economic realities in terms of the temporality of all of this that he has to factor in. Clearly, the strategic oil reserve is being depleted. We're already at the level where we're dipping into the continuity of government stockpile, which is reserved exclusively for the military, at least unofficially anyways. And so, you know, here we are back at war again. The strait is closed. Oil is reacting a little bit, but not really, not in the way you think it should be. And so, I mean, there's a time limit here that's, you know, so they have to do something soon. So when do you think whatever this something is going to materialize?
I think it's going to start with probably a massive final blitz this weekend. I think they're going to probably try to hit Pickaxe Mountain, which is really fortified. It's supposedly the future of Iran's nuclear weapons program. My understanding is Pickaxe is not complete yet. They started building it in 2020. It's in the Zagros Mountains of Iran, but it's not done yet. And that's why I think Trump is thinking he can hit it because it's not fully operational yet. Mind you, the facility is 330 feet underneath this mountain. It goes that deep. It's the deepest, I think it's the deepest military facility in the world. Air Force pilots I've talked to, because I have an article that's pending at 1945.com. I spoke to a couple of former Air Force flyboys, and they don't think we can hit it with conventional bombs. That they don't think it's. They think we can. What they think is going to happen is we're going to blow up sort of the structure supporting it on the outside. We'll blow up the ventilators, you know, that lead to the facility. We'll blow up the fuel depots that are there. We'll take out the roads. We'll take out any construction equipment. But they don't think we're going to be able to actually collapse the facility. At least not the deepest parts, which are, like I said, about 330 feet under the ground. But I think Trump wants to do this. It's going to be a big show. It'll be a dazzling light spectacle. He loves that. But I don't think it'll end there. I think we'll do something there, and then Trump will try to then say, okay, reopen the strait, and the Iranians are going to give him the bird, and then Trump's going to be like, all right, I got to go now. We got to go heavier, and he'll keep ratcheting it up. That's what I think is going to happen, and eventually, soon, you're going to see some kind of ground operation. And it might even be, you know, first the Iraqi Kurds do something, then whatever we're expecting sort of the internal dissent to do within Iran will do something. you might see also the movement of ISIS or former ISIS from Syria into Lebanon to fight Hezbollah, and then suddenly you'll see the U.S. kind of working its ground forces into the Strait of Hormuz. But I think first he's going to want to bomb some targets that remain. I think he's going to listen to Conricus. I mean, I told Conricus he's going to get his wish. Right. I think Trump's going to blow up the civilian infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure. The Iranians have already said, if you hit our electrical grid, that's it. We're done. It's full bore. And I know that a lot of Americans roll their eyes and are like, oh, well, who cares? The Iranians have a lot of capabilities they haven't exercised yet. One of them is a comprehensive global terrorist network. And a lot of those guys are here in North America because Joe Biden let them in through the front door. And we don't know what those guys are doing, but we know they're heavily trained and they're well funded and they're disciplined. And in fact, I talked to a guy, I might have told you about this the last time I was on. I talked to a retired security professional. One of the last things he did shortly after 9/11 was he did an assessment on the physical infrastructure of America's energy grid. And what he found is it would be as simple as getting a guy with an AK-47 to go to one of those and just shoot. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And just knock it out with a few shots, well placed shots from an AK-47. He said you do that to a handful of them, either at the East Coast or the West Coast. He said you've basically crippled the United States. He said it's going to take about 2 years to really get the systems back online, because they have to order them from China. And you want to bet China's not going to be too quick to hand those systems over, even if we pay them a pretty penny. So, there's a lot of things the Iranians haven't done yet that I'm very afraid if we do what Trump wants to do, they're going to, and by the way, you mentioned it before, I think the Iranians do have a rudimentary nuclear capability, and I think they've been holding it in reserve. And if they really think it's the end for them, they will use it. And, it's going to get ugly over the next 6 months, I think.
If they start taking out power plants in the Middle East in the summer, I'm looking at the Tehran temperatures, 38, 39, 39, 38. That's metric, of course, Celsius. And
so say that sounds kind of nice.
yeah, exactly. But that, of course, is probably even worse in the Gulf countries. And so without air conditioning, these are not water. Really survivable conditions.
No.
And so then you have a massive refugee crisis on your hands. And then, of course, the Iranian reprisal would likely target those Gulf states. And then you just get this, escalating feedback loop whereby we potentially start targeting oil and gas infrastructure, desalination plants, and then this just completely throws the whole...
It's an insensate wargasm. That's what Herman Kahn called it.
What was it?
An insensate wargasm.
Could you explain?
Yeah, it's what you're talking about. Basically, where one escalatory move begets another, and it just goes faster and faster and faster and faster until basically the entire conflict just burns itself out and everybody loses.
Right.
And he was using that to describe nuclear war with the Soviet Union in the 60s, but I think you can apply it to what's going on here. Because and by the way, I had to retract an essay. I accidentally published it. I meant to do one more review, but there was an essay that I had to pull back immediately because a source had told me that the Russians were moving forces from their Latakia air base in Syria, and they were trying to establish an A2AD bubble in southern Syria to prevent Shiraz forces from moving into Lebanon. Now, I brought it up with Conricus yesterday. And Conricus kind of smiled and nodded, so maybe there is something to it. But the problem was I had to retract it because the sourcing was not what I like. I like a lot of sourcing on my claims. But ultimately, the Russians do still have a force presence in Syria. The Russians do not like what's going on right now in Syria or Iran. It wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility if we start moving toward this condition of an insensate wargasm. That's war, W-A-R, gasm, that the Russians will then intervene I do know that the Russian media reported that a group of Russian, of course, if Russian media is reporting it, it's obviously government approved. So either it's disinformation or it's a signal. But I was reading yesterday that the Russians have deployed a cluster of nuclear submarines through the Arctic, went under the ice, and the assumption is that they're heading to the American East Coast. Now, you're going to park those things off the American East Coast as a deterrence, right? So the Russians are planning to do something now, likely in Ukraine.
What was the source of that information?
It was one of the Russian
Telegram.
It might have been Telegram, because I read so much I can't remember now.
Yeah.
I'd have to. It might have been Sputnik.
I mean, for all we know, they're already there, right? Like,
well, I'm sure that they do, but this sounds like it was some kind of an increase.
okay.
And again, it's state approved, so either it's disinformation totally, or it's being put out to send a signal to the people in America, in the government, who read Russian propaganda to know what's going on in Russia. Because our intelligence services do actually pay attention to what their government approved stuff is saying. It might have been a signal to say, hey, you better back off. And it could be for Ukraine, but we can't discount, even though it's a smaller number of troops and whatnot in Syria, we can't discount that the Russians might decide, okay, look, Iran's our partner. Hezbollah is a partner of Iran. We don't want to see an escalation from Jelani, because of the fact also the Russians don't like Jelani. The Russians were at war with him until a minute ago. So, when you talk about escalations, it isn't just between us and the Iranians. We have to start factoring in now, because of the impact on the global economy, because of how the Iranian front is affecting the Ukrainian front. And they are connected, by the way. The Russians escalate there, we escalate in Iran, right? I mean, there's something there. There's also an Israeli connection to both. But we have to start thinking about great power introduction here. What are the Russians going to do? What are the Chinese going to do? Right? What are the North Koreans going to do? The North Koreans are partners with Iran, we forget, and the North Koreans are very close with the Russians, and really the Russians, and they're also partnered with the Chinese. But military to military, the North Koreans are fighting alongside. In fact, I was told they have about 50,000 North Korean troops just sitting idle in Belarus. Okay. So, this has all the makings truly of World War III. And in my view, we're right there when this pops from being just a regional issue to really global, especially once the economies start getting dragged down, and they're starting to already.
Just going back to something that you said in closing with respect to Pickaxe Mountain, do you think that would purely be for Pyrrhic effect, or is it that he actually is concerned about highly enriched uranium and their nuclear program, or is that just no longer one of the primary objectives here?
Well, I think, to be fair to Trump, he's, for like 10 or 15, maybe even 20 years, he has been pretty consistent when Iran came up that he doesn't want them to get a nuke. And to be clear, I don't want them to get a nuke either, but I think we're well past that point. But to be fair to Trump, he has always been consistent about that. Okay, I'll give him that. So I think that's part of his thinking. But remember, it was the International Science and Strategic, or International Science. The acronym is ISIS, unfortunately. But they had an analysis out. They looked at all the satellite imagery of the Pickaxe facility, and they said they don't think it's completed yet. It's not fully operational. So the idea that, we're going to be taking out their nuclear capability that they have now, no, if anything, we'll just be trying to deprive them of that very important new capability. But I really think Trump just wants to put on a dazzling show. I think Trump's a showman.
Pack it in for a while? Is that
no? I don't think he's going to pack it in for a while. I think this will be. I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit some of the grid. I'm going to do some other targets, and then I'm going to go to Tehran. You better give up the Strait of Hormuz, and then Tehran's going to give him the bird, and then he's going to say, "Okay, that's it." He's already. I think it was the Globe and Mail. I think it was a Canadian paper. Maybe it was Time.
That's
one of those papers in the last week had an essay wherein they quoted Trump as telling his advisors in the last 2 weeks he wants to completely destroy the Iranian regime militarily. So
you're forecasting what sounds like a very intractable situation that implies very high energy prices. So how does this then factor into the election? Because if he goes through with this and the IRGC flips him off and says, no, we're still not complying and the strait remains closed and we start scraping the bottom of the barrel, then prices are going to go through the roof and we will cease to be called doomsayers and catastrophizers and actually be vindicated in our oil
defeatists or whatever they calling me. Yeah. I think on some see, this has been my question because, I deal a lot with domestic politics with the campaign side of things. And I was just actually, one of the reasons I was 5 minutes late is because I was talking to a colleague who's looking at these polling numbers and is like, it doesn't make sense. Why are they need to be de-escalating like now because it's going to impact everything going forward politically. So when I was talking to this guy today, we started talking like, why wouldn't Trump care? Well, one of the theories is maybe it's because he knows it's his second term and he doesn't care. He just wants to be seen as winning.
Lame duck.
And lame duck. Another thing is he might not care because he doesn't care about the Republican Party. He's not a party man. He actually might like, on some level, being able to be the one to say, I was the last successful Republican national politician. So on some level, maybe that's an ego thing. There's a darker theory, and it's related to his speech last night,
right?
His election rigging speech.
Yep.
It could be possible, and I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I mean, at this point, we have to entertain all possibilities because the usual logic and rationale no longer seems to work. It could be possible that Trump's going to say, our elections are infiltrated by foreign adversaries, and I'm going to shut them down. Or, hey, a Republican firm has bought a lot of these election gear that we used in 2020, or a firm led by a Republican. So, maybe implied in this is I know that I'm going to get the votes I want no matter what because votes don't matter anymore. That could very well be it. I don't know. But all I do know is if all things are equal, if everything goes the way it should go in terms of normal operations in an election, even at this rate, there's no way the Republicans are holding on to majorities. It's just a question of how badly they're going to lose if it's a normal election. And I just don't know if Trump just doesn't care or if, I don't know. I don't know. Trump, for some reason, is not fazed by something that should really faze him, even if this is his last term. I'm sorry, that beeping is me. That's my door.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my kids. My kids are coming in and out.
Oh, okay.
But even if Trump this is his final term, and that's a big if now in my mind, he might try to go for number 3. Who knows? But even if it is, he just might figure, you know what? I don't care anymore. I want to be the guy to win. And the Iranians called my bluff at the start of the war. So now I got to go all the way up this thing. And it might be bloody and it might be expensive, but at least I can say at the end of the day, we beat the Iranians. And I think that
those are all really plausible scenarios, I think. And there's maybe one more, and it's like a reverse psychology of sorts. And it's that maybe if we put our tinfoil hats on, they're just one tragedy away from galvanizing the American people.
Yeah.
Clutch at those pearls and, get revenge. Because like you said earlier on, that once that there's that immediate effect of seeing the caskets come back, yes, it tends to be the spark for anti-war sentiment, but it also, in the immediate sense, I can't remember who you referenced as, showing that it actually increases people's support for the war.
That was Robert Pape. That's part of his escalation theory or
right.
escalation trap.
Unfortunately, people are fickle and they're easily impressed upon. And so I would not, maybe there's some thinking like that we're going to have some big event and
it sounds like the Israelis are thinking like that.
Well, I mean, with all the talk about the assassination stuff, which I seen on Far's News yesterday, the post got taken down on X. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
I saw that.
It was like a 3-minute video that was kind of, and that was strange because it's like they're playing right into what the Israelis and Trump were trying to set up there, which is like saying, well, even if there's an attempt, it doesn't have to be a successful assassination, an attempt, which could just be maybe somebody was planning something or, and so for them to put that out, it's like, why are you giving them ammunition for that?
Exactly. Yeah, I know. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. And I will tell you, I think Trump knows what really happened at Butler, and I think he's covering it up. And I think it's interesting. The second assassination in 2024 has also been by the Ukrainian, the pro-Ukrainian guy, Ryan Ralph, I think. I think that's interesting how that's been swept under the rug. I think it's interesting what happened with the attempted shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. That's kind of disappeared. And what happened with Air Force One leaving the NATO convention in Turkey, right? The president had his stupid Qatari plane that he insisted we had to buy for him. He couldn't take it, so he had to fly to London, to Mendenhall Air Force Base from Turkey. And this was on his way back from the NATO conference. And basically he had to fly the old Air Force One from Turkey to Mendenhall. And then they parked the new Air Force One at Mendenhall, and they did who knows what with it. And then they determined, okay, you can take the new Air Force One back to DC now that you're out of Europe. And, and now I was told, and the New York Times has confirmed this, and now these reporters are being harassed by the administration, but I was told that the new Air Force One, as nice as it is, it's still a civilian plane at its core, and the Air Force couldn't add in all of the countermeasures that are supposed to go into the presidential plane because it's not a specifically designed presidential plane up to the Air Force standard. So there was a credible enough threat, and we now know it came from Israel. The Israelis warned us. They warned Secret Service intelligence about this, protective intelligence, that leaving Turkey, there was going to be an attempt made on the president's life on his new Air Force One. And so that's four, count them four. In the last 2 years, attempts on his life. At no point do I think the Iranians were actually the source. Maybe the last one. But certainly 3 out of the 4, I don't believe the Iranians were the source. And I don't want to go any further than that, but because then we're just speculating. But I do not believe, and it's not because I think Iran is so wonderful. I think it's because particularly in 2024, I know this from talking to people in the diplomatic community, the Iranians actually thought Trump's reelection might work to their favor because they actually thought that maybe Trump was going to try to get a deal that was better than the JCPOA that Obama got. And so they didn't want to see anything happen to him. Now, obviously, it's different, but those first 2 assassination attempts I've never believed were Iranian. And the way that the FBI so quickly came out and said, oh, it was the Iranians, definitely. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe. But then again, that seems a little... The FBI can't get anything straight these days. Yeah. And it's always... Well, I'm just going to stop there, but I don't believe that the official explanations for those assassination attempts on Trump are who they say they were.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something brewing with respect to that. Lastly, before I let you go, I mean, there is a distinct possibility that come Sunday night, Trump is going to announce mission accomplished, and we're going to kick the can down the road again. I mean, we have to cover
never
our
doubt
bases.
Taco. Yeah, never doubt Taco.
Never doubt it, because, it seems too always when the energy is running high like this with, high intensity strikes, that all of a sudden, they throw us a curveball and they kick the can down the road a little bit further.
That still doesn't mean it's over, though. That still doesn't mean it's over, because I feel like
they're postponing.
They're postponing it to let the weapons reload and rebuild, but of course it'll never be enough time because we're so far behind now. But the taco is a tactic. It's a tactic. Mm-hmm.
Well, my communist camera crew has a lot of nothing that they need to get done, and they're begging me to end this interview so that they can go and smoke a lot of weed this weekend. That's legal here in Canada, so I can say that.
It's legal in certain parts of the United States as well.
Yeah, it's
or decriminalized. Yeah.
So I want to thank you for coming out, man. Always insightful, and congrats on that kick-ass masterclass that you gave Jonathan Henriquez. And I encourage people to go check that interview out. Check Brandon's Substack as well. And we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.